Rolling.
Hey guys, I'm Tim Kotzman here with Ethan, Jesse, and Scott. And I'm going to pass it directly over to Jesse for him to introduce himself, and we'll go around the room.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm Jesse Kobernick. I'm a corporate lawyer. I work mostly in capital markets and M&A. We are joined here today with Ethan Peck and Scott Shepard. These are the two gentlemen that are primarily responsible for the Bitcoin shareholder proposal that's going to the Microsoft shareholders to be voted on December 10th. Scott and Ethan, if you guys could just give a brief intro on yourselves and a little bit about your organization and kind of the free enterprise project, that would be great.
Sure. Ethan's the star of this activity, and so Ethan, why don't you go first, and I'll do the backup.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Ethan Peck, the Deputy Director of the Free Enterprise Project, which is a program of the National Center for Public Policy Research. And we're a 3-person team with Stefan Padfield. He's not here right now. And Scott?
Yep. And the National Center is a parent organization within which the Free Enterprise Project lies. I'm a past director and now the fairy godfather, as it were, of the Free Enterprise Project. And what we do is it's all in the name, right? We have opposed corporations jumping into partisanship, jumping into breaches of law and constitution and fiduciary duty to favor a particular political stand. And because we're in favor of free markets, and free markets to function fully require stable currency, we are backing proposals that ask companies to get involved in and invest in Bitcoin, and to take seriously their commitment to an economy that functions properly and freely.
Guys, that's great. So the Bitcoin shareholder proposal that's going to Microsoft, of course, gained a ton of attention. In some cases, I think people misread or read into the proposal things that weren't entirely there. Maybe you guys could speak specifically to what the language is asking the board or asking the company to do.
Okay. So yeah, the proposal actually requests an assessment if the company should purchase Bitcoin or not. It doesn't directly request that the company buy Bitcoin. It's kind of lame, honestly, but we wish we could request more, but SEC regulations restrict you from requesting anything more than that. There's a chance that could be shot down in what's called the no action process, which would allow the company to omit the proposal from its ballot. What was the second question?
What's the actual obligation, I guess, on the part of if this were to pass, what would Microsoft have to do?
They would have to conduct an assessment. But because shareholders only can get away with asking reports or assessments and such, or requests, not, direct, demands of the company, the SEC views that as if you're making the actual request, not the report. So it's a language thing for why we have to submit it that way, but it would put pressure on Microsoft to buy Bitcoin. It just wouldn't be like a guarantee.
And Jesse, as some background, because I imagine many of your viewers have thoughts about the SEC, especially the monstrosity of the last 4 years. There's a process that has no statutory basis by which the SEC reviews shareholder proposals if companies ask them to, and then without any explanation at all, no written decision, decides which ones it likes. And given that we're talking about the bureaucracy in the swamp, you won't be surprised to learn that they quite like the left ones, and they don't like any others. And so the bias is so thick, and the violations of the Administrative Procedure Act so overwhelming that it's just been a rigged system for years. And we're suing them. We're suing the SEC in 4 different suits right now, but one of them is to either fix or end this ridiculous farce.
So in the case of this proposal, when you drafted the language, you submit it to the board, you have to comply with all kind of the timing obligations. What happens at that point? Do they respond and ask you questions? Do they go to the SEC with the proposal? Maybe you could walk us through that process.
Yeah. If they think that they have a chance to omit the proposal, like we just talked about, then they'll go to the SEC. In this case, they didn't because we were careful with the language. But after that, we usually reach out to them, or sometimes they reach out to us, and we try to set up a negotiation, because a lot of times these proposals, all shareholder proposals, they mostly don't pass with overwhelming majority. And so we try to come to some kind of settlement. We'll withdraw the proposal, keep it off the ballot if you meet us halfway. So I tried that with Microsoft. I offered a number of things, and they just didn't want to hear it. We can talk more about that. I have no problem discussing that.
What we've found over the years is that, either Larry Fink, when he brags about forcing behaviors on corporations, is very effective, and these people are acting against interest in ways that are going to be very bad for them, or they've all drunk the Kool-Aid and are acting in their own pure partisanship without admitting it. So what we think and what we fully intend is that a lot of companies that have been acting that way need to be sued, and some CEOs need to pay quite a bit out of their personal pockets, and we're working in that direction as well.
Do you see that trend changing at all, particularly like BlackRock, being so successful with the Bitcoin ETF? Do you see kind of a changing of tides at all on that front, or is it still sort of, we go with whatever the board kind of recommends to us, and we don't approve shareholder proposals generally?
I think that's complicated. I spoke to BlackRock after I met with Microsoft, and they didn't want to negotiate. I offered, for them to buy less than 1%. I offered for them to withdraw the proposal. As Michael Saylor recently revealed, I offered to withdraw the proposal if if Satya Nadella meets with Saylor directly in person. They still wouldn't do it. And so then the game became, okay, let's see if we can garner votes for this. And so I set up meetings with all the top shareholders, BlackRock, Geode Capital, State Street coming up. And in the BlackRock negotiation, they usually don't take calls like that with us. They're very dismissive of us because we come from a sort of pro-fiduciary, anti-ESG place. We're a thorn in their side, essentially. And so they don't show us any deference. But this time, surprisingly, they did. So, and I think that's probably because BlackRock has such a large interest in Microsoft buying Bitcoin. That being said, I don't want to speak too much to the negotiations that were, private with them, and I don't know how they're going to vote. They were more open than I had previously seen BlackRock with our proposals, and also shout out to Parker Lewis, who joined that call, who did a great job in bringing a third-party objective analysis for them. But the investment stewardship departments of these asset managers are staffed with people that generally are hostile towards proponents like ourselves. But to be fair to BlackRock, they're giving the proposal a fair shake, and they're not, any biases against us in the past, I don't think have affected how they're analyzing this proposal.
But Jesse, just hot off the presses, as I just read it about 15 minutes ago, for the first time ever for a non-governance proposal, Glass Lewis, which is one of the two proxy advisory services, and Ethan, this might be news to you, one of the two proxy advisory services, and then the three, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the first time any of those five duty-breaching controllers of other people's money for their political purposes, the first time any of them has supported a proposal that didn't come from a left ESG point of view, that's an ERS proposal, and that's Ethan's doing. And it's spectacular news. And you're right, things are different now. This is a total break from the past.
Oh, have they publicly come out and announced that, or is it that kind of okay?
Yeah.
That's,
Now,
that's
I mean, it's possible I
congratulations.
misread something, but as I was reading it just minutes ago, my understanding is that Glass Lewis, for the first time, has supported a proposal from a non-left proponent on a subject that the wokesters don't have it much interest in or loathe, because when you have free and stable money, as I don't have to tell you, you've got a freedom from government fiddling.
Yeah, I think that's because of the nature of Bitcoin. Like, generally, our proposals, they just try to remove wokeness from corporations. We're a conservative organization, but we never push any conservative ideology on any company. We just try to move corporations back to neutral and out of politics altogether. Other shareholder proponents there are other groups like us on the right and that are more interested in pushing their ideology on companies, and we distance ourselves from them. We're truly interested in corporate neutrality. And that's what inspired us to do this proposal, because it was finally a way to push something to request something of a company that's forward shareholder value. It's in line with their fiduciary duties to do something like this, to put Bitcoin in their treasury. But it's completely void of the sort of ESG versus anti-ESG debate amongst shareholders. It's apolitical. And so that's another reason why it's completely in line with our mission and why we submitted it.
Well, and I mean, we all are either conservatives or libertarians, but the program is only conservative if it's conservative to be honest about what capitalism is. It's to follow the law, to follow the Constitution, to not make pretenses, as Larry Fink said flat out, I'm not woke, I'm not partisan, but then provide a laundry list of ways that he was pushing the whole of government initiatives of the Biden administration. So we're just pro-law and duty, really, and it's a shame that that's a conservative libertarian position rather than the absolute thing that everybody does.
Yeah, I got you on that. As far as, so you mentioned at the meet, or Saylor has mentioned that he would speak on behalf of the proposal. Would that come in the form of a video that would be played at the shareholder meeting or at a board meeting? Is that the expectation?
Yeah. So I spoke with Michael. That was a great experience. And he's exactly the same person in a private meeting as he is on podcasts and publicly. Yeah. He was very helpful, and he was willing, to cooperate any which way possible. He came up with that idea to try to, get in front of Satya one-on-one. That didn't work because they were, they really didn't want to negotiate at all. And they were being very stubborn. And so then the idea is then I offered him to speak on my behalf at the meeting instead of me. And he accepted, and he's going to record a video. And sometimes, rarely, they're in person. But this particular one is a video.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. There's a lot of funny commentary out there on how is Michael Saylor going to fit 2 hours of Bitcoin, 3 minutes, but we'll see. Should be fun and interesting. I did want to ask you about the investor meetings a little bit more, because it's Microsoft's response in the proxy statement was really, we assess these things in the ordinary course. We've assessed digital assets, cryptocurrency. We think volatility is a concern. And I think mostly what they've said is, we don't need this assessment because we already performed this assessment. So my question is, do any of the investor groups that you speak to, have they seen any, do they receive any sort of assessment from Microsoft or any details on what they've done?
No, that's exactly almost all the time, not just this proposal, but also this proposal. When companies, they oppose pretty much every proposal, and they have to list the reasons why. And almost every time they just say, this is unnecessary because we already considered it. It's the standard the response. And what they told me, Microsoft, when I spoke to them, was we've already analyzed, and you can see their public, what they put in the proxy statement. We've already analyzed investing in crypto. They said crypto, not Bitcoin, and for many different reasons. Our proposal is very specific. It asks about adding Bitcoin to the Treasury, Bitcoin only, and only a small amount in order to protect shareholders from inflation. It's a very specific use case, one thing, and they did not do that analysis.
Most of these opposition statements to shareholder proposals, you can tell if you're interested in the proposal, you like the idea, you can tell whether the company is lying or not by whether they address the specific issues raised with specific responses in their opposition proposal. 90% of the time, they absolutely don't want to do what they would refuse to do. And so they'll say, well, happy talk. We've surely taken care of this. No examples, unicorn dust. And as a general rule, if that's the response we find, there's probably at least some merit in the proposal, and they're definitely lying.
Gotcha. Yeah, it did read like a form that they had prepared in some prior year and copy and paste into the proxy statement. As far as so, Tim and I are obviously big Bitcoin fans, but also big MicroStrategy enthusiasts. Do you think what Michael Saylor is doing, what MicroStrategy is doing, and their performance comes into the thinking at all for a company like Microsoft when you look at how they've performed relative to MicroStrategy over the last 4 or 5 years?
It should. I mean, that's why I put it in the proposal. I didn't have to when I submitted the proposal. It could have just said everything that it said without adding MicroStrategy as a sort of analogy. A different use case. They actually did it. Look at the results. And since then, how much? I think the price back then was like 100 something. And so I put it there because they're a good example. But I also told Microsoft that they didn't have to, put their whole treasury in Bitcoin. Like a lot of shareholders that buy Microsoft, they might not buy it with a mindset. People that buy MicroStrategy knowing that it's volatile. I do. But the people that buy Microsoft don't necessarily do that. But that doesn't mean, and that was the number one concern that BlackRock had, that I spoke with Egan Jones. They also, their proxy advisory service, they decide how it's voted. They had that concern, and Microsoft's concern too. Always that's the issue that they have, the volatility, but they're not thinking about the long-term risk, not long-term fact of the fact that they're, diluting the shareholder value slowly over time.
So in the context of kind of all the shareholder proposals that you guys have put forth, it sounds like it's an uphill battle to get anything approved by shareholders of a large public company. Do you think this proposal has any shot, or do you view it more as, the benefit is really that people are thinking about this now and the boards are going to be forced to think about this now?
I think that this year is going to be a fascinating year in this tiny, bizarre little area of the universe that the three of us specialize in. First of all, there's a new administration, and this administration, unlike any any administration since I was 15 or so, ended, is going to be effective and going to have very few milquetoasts in it, including at the SEC, which is to suggest that the whole method of going about shareholder proposals might just be eliminated, which means companies will have fiduciary duty when they decide which proposals to include or to exclude. And from BlackRock on down, the people who have been forcing behaviors, capital starvation, all of that, the big banks, the big investment houses have an absolute duty not to do their partisan bidding with other people's money. They've been doing that and lying about it for 5 years. There are massive legal liabilities in play, and there will be, I suspect, a Justice Department that will be interested in applying laws appropriately, and an FTC that for the first time in a Republican administration in 70, 80 years, will enforce antitrust laws in ways that will be surprising to a lot of CEOs. And so I expect this year to be radically different in every conceivable way.
Yeah. And I'll add to that I think that these proposals have a benefit even when they don't pass, because the votes, they're determined by the asset managers and the proxy advisory services, almost in unison. I mean, if you look at how board members get voted on, it's like 95%, 95%, 95. I've been to hundreds of shareholder meetings. I can't recall any time a board member hasn't been elected, which is absurd. It's like 800 for 800 at 95% plus. So that's the way this voting goes. Sometimes proposals pass, but that's because the asset managers and the proxy advisory services decide that they should pass. And so if it passes, I suspect that it won't pass. They almost never pass. I do have a little bit more hope for this one to get a higher percentage. And if it gets 5%, we can resubmit next year, and that would look a lot worse for Microsoft when the price is much higher. And they, explicitly said we don't even want to do an analysis. And another thing I'll add: we submitted a proposal to Boeing in the spring, auditing their DEI policies after, if anyone knows the story, they very infamously gave bonuses to their board members and executives for meeting certain DEI requirements instead of safety requirements. And then Boeing fell apart and the stock took a dive. And so we submitted a proposal about that, about their DEI program, how it's against shareholder interest. It violates their fiduciary duties to behave in this way. I think the proposal got like 2%. Couple months later, they dropped DEI. So putting them on the spot still has an effect. That's why they're willing to negotiate with us and have us withdraw the proposal, even though they're confident that the proposal is not going to pass, because they don't want to deal with it in the public eye. And shout out to all Bitcoiners, what Bitcoiners have already done to make this a viral thing and put Microsoft on the spot and make it very known that Microsoft's about to fumble bad. That's effective on every other company.
Absolutely. And going to that kind of resubmission point you made, is that, I thought it was kind of an Exchange Act rule where if you don't hit certain thresholds, then you can't resubmit for the subsequent year. Is that right? Where it's, if you don't hit 5%, then you have to wait some period of time, 2 or 3 years or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. And, that's, our totals up till now have been very, very low. In part because, and I'll tell the story, was it ISS or Glass Lewis that we were talking to, where ISS, we had a meeting where the people in the meeting went to extravagant lengths to demonstrate how absolutely tedious it was to have us in a virtual room. And there was one of them genuinely started filibustering, just reading nonsense in order to eat up the time. Another jackass came in about 10 minutes late. If it had been 10 years ago, would have been reading the paper very loudly. I mean, and it ended with that fella saying, "Well, your vote totals are going to stay in the basement." And I said, "That's right. And if they do, that's proof of your breach and your violation of contract and all of these things." I think the worm has turned in significant ways, and that we're going to see that, and that the Bitcoin proposals are going to be able to take advantage of that, and that we're potentially really on the cusp of having a sensible money option again.
You mentioned the DOJ and FTC changes in policy, changes in approach. One question I had was on kind of shareholder litigation that you might see in connection with the breach of fiduciary duty. If this continues for another 5 years and you have companies that are, have hundreds of millions in cash that's losing value, and Bitcoin just continues to appreciate at 50 to 100% a year, I wonder how, at what point will a energetic litigator take the cause up and file suit for that sort of thing.
Well, Jesse, if you amongst your listeners and reader or viewers happen to have any, but there are lots of Bitcoin millionaires, right? If there's a Bitcoin millionaire who'd be willing to stump up the initial cash, we're ready to go. And we have a whole list. We've been building evidence records for years. We just need the capital. And I think we just need the capital the first time, because the awards would be such that it would be self-fulfilling. And then it would be a matter of wrecking ball. But I don't think you have to take after every company, although the lawyers eventually will. What you have to do is make a couple of high profile cases, bankrupt Bob Iger, say, and some others, and then everybody else will suddenly remember their fiduciary duties.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. It could have a cascading effect. Scott, you also mentioned the change at the SEC with Gensler. I read that he has announced he's going to retire, I think June or January 20th, and that should usher in a new chairman. And one of the issues that is discussed a lot in the corporate Bitcoin adoption realm is the SEC's SAB 121 guidance. And maybe I can give background, or you could give background on that, Scott, for the viewers, and speak a little to how that might impact corporate Bitcoin adoption. Well,
Gary Gensler's SEC has been utterly lawless in virtually everything it's done. It's violated the Administrative Procedures Act. It has acted in pure partisanship. It has changed what had been neutral rules to be rigged toward the ESG goals, which were the whole of government initiatives of the Biden administration. And you can't be an activist government and favor stable currency. And so, anti-ESG was a half-hidden part of the whole of government agenda, and that surprisingly was built into the regulating that Gensler's SEC has done in this area. The Congress moved against it. Biden vetoed. I will go way out on a limb and suggest that veto will not reemerge. And so, the barricades that the Biden administration put in the way of freedom in every way they could will be taken down, including this.
Yep. But I'll add that even if it'll be easier for corporations to purchase Bitcoin and add it to their treasury, they could still do it now. So I don't think that's what's getting in the way of Microsoft doing it.
And incidentally, this goes back to something that we were talking about in passing a little bit ago. BlackRock has Bitcoin ETFs. I'm not going to say too much except to say that, antithetical to BlackRock, Larry Fink, and that crowd's personal policy preferences, which is to get to rule the world from Davos without having to run for office anywhere, is stable currency that they can't screw with. And so I would not look to places like that to collect my interests in Bitcoin or anything that will assist genuine freedom.
You mean to say that BlackRock might not be the best partner in our efforts to bring about a Bitcoin standard?
Yeah, well, I think I would think twice, given their absolutely unbroken record of trying to force, by their misuse of other people's money, the same immiseration that the really undemocratic European Union structures have forced in Europe, with the consequences you can see with the deindustrialization and collapse of the German economy, which is one of the undertold stories of all time. And so yeah, I wouldn't trust Larry Fink under any circumstance.
So back to Ethan's point briefly on the Microsoft not taking up whether or not they can custody the Bitcoin with their bank is maybe separate from and apart from SAB 121. But I do think it seems like if you have SAB 121 repealed and companies can't kind of use it as an excuse to say, hey, our banks can't even custody this. We have to go form these third-party relationships. Do you think that? Do you hear that at all? I guess when you put this proposal forward, do you hear that excuse, or is it kind of a lot more? It's just too volatile.
No, yeah, they didn't put that excuse forward at all. They just said that they already looked at it. I said, would you add Bitcoin to your balance sheet? And they said, well, we already looked at all kinds of crypto for many reasons. And I was like, but Bitcoin specifically for the purposes of rampant inflation, you guys holding cash equivalents, bonds, not good enough. And they said, well, Bitcoin's too volatile. We already looked at it. And, back and forth. And I gave as good explanation as I possibly could have as to why in the long term that doesn't matter. And I think at one point his, the corporate treasurer that was on the call, he sort of smiled. So I think he knows. I think another part of it is not that they don't know. They're not stupid people. I think they just don't care about shareholders. The brass, the top. I'm not saying the corporate treasurer. I'm saying the top brass, like the boards, top executives. They get paid no matter what. Like I don't think that they care as much about shareholders as they have to. And I think that someone like a corporate treasurer just doesn't want to rock the boat. That's the biggest thing. No one wants to risk their job, even if they believe in it personally, own Bitcoin on their own. They're not going to risk their job. They're going to play it safe, and because it's viewed as risky, even though it's really not risky. It's the opposite.
Well,
what's risky is holding bonds.
Yeah, and Jesse, again, another tell is when you get adjectives without comparisons, right? Oh, it's too volatile. As compared to what? We've all seen those charts of the collapse in the value of the American dollar. Whatever is true of Bitcoin, it's not that debacle. And so are they out of, do they hold no cash? Oh, it's too, because it's not volatile, it just collapses. No, of course not. But they will never give you any examples because they're lying. And the second, I can't remember the second consideration, so go ahead.
Yeah, they prefer a non-volatile asset that certainly depreciates versus a volatile asset that appreciates over time, which is kind of insane. And I think you're right, Ethan. The incentives just aren't in place for a lot of these directors and officers to want to take the leap and entertain this idea. I think you probably need a closely held company like MicroStrategy was to take the leap, but hopefully that'll change, particularly given this strategic Bitcoin reserve bill that was proposed by Senator Loomis and provides that the U.S. over 5 years would be buying 1 million Bitcoins and holding it as a strategic reserve asset. And that seems to kind of be changing the climate entirely for what's kind of an appropriate use of Bitcoin. Maybe you guys could speak to that and see if do you think it makes any difference to these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think speaking as to what I just said, they're all hesitant to move first. They don't want to do anything that would, cause the spotlight on them personally, that they don't want to rock the boat. And so I think once the United States government does it, then I think corporations are slow to move. They're all scared to adopt. Same thing with the DEI thing. Boeing dropped it. Then Caterpillar, there was a domino effect. They all, you saw like 10, 15 companies drop it in a matter of 2 weeks because one company went first. I think there was John Deere, I forgot who, but it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing with Bitcoin. A company like MicroStrategy, you have the founder, Michael Saylor, being proactive, buying Bitcoin, or like Semler Scientific. I think it was Eric Semler who went out and did it. When you have a founder at a company, he's more likely to, have enough balls to do it. I think that when these companies that are sort of run by puppets of the asset managers, they're just in their cozy jobs. A lot of the boards, another separate thing that we've done a report on board incest. So it's like how many boards are overlapping, how many board members sit on like 5, 6, 7 boards. That's a huge problem because the board members, they sit on so many boards at the same time. their loyalty isn't to the specific company, it's to the system that moves them around on different boards and keeps them on multiple boards at the same time. There's been a sort of coup of the entirety of all boardrooms across America. And so they have a very specific mindset and a sort of hive mindset too. So I think that once the first domino falls, more will come. And certainly the biggest domino is a strategic reserve for the US government.
So what do you think the future looks like for these types of shareholder proposals? Will you guys be looking at other companies and other potential targets to bring this up at?
We already started.
Yeah. This is just the beginning of what I expect to be a long and successful, eventually, campaign. And again, all the credit goes to Ethan for being on top of this issue long before the rest of us and steering me to, what was that book that was just the perfect
Bitcoin Standard.
That's right, and who convinced us to include this in our portfolio, and I think there's a lot of others actors in moving to get us in this direction, but I think together we're going to get there faster than we might have expected even a year ago.
Awesome, that's fantastic. I think everyone in the Bitcoin space is very excited, and even if it doesn't pass, it's a landmark event, I think.
Oh, it won't. Listen, it won't pass this time, but because of the way
you never know.
Well, it won't. But that's not a defeat. If it gets twice as many votes as because of the finagling of the big investors of other people's money we usually get, that's going to be a thunderclap around American boardrooms. And so victory comes at something vastly less than 50%.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as what can viewers do to help? People that are watching today, what can they do to help your organization, help the cause in any way they can?
Well, I'll tell you what, it would be magic. It would be 400 Christmases in a row if one of your viewers did want to initially fund the first of those shareholder derivative suits, because I think that's the wrecking ball. But I think another thing that they can do, if they own shares in any of these companies, go to the meetings or attend the virtual meetings and put questions to the boards and ask them about these things directly, and then raise all hell when there's some intermediary who tortures their question into nonsense and allows happy talk from the CEO, and pressure these companies. When we've got our proposal there, and the left had 30-40 years ago got into this arena and pushed companies to the left because they had their bans pushing and harassing corporate boards to do what they wanted. Well, that's the precedent. And so these companies are starting to realize that, having behaved in response to that in the past in a purely partisan way, they've now got to do the same thing when the other side kicks up its voice and efforts. And so pressure will be really effective in this area.
And I'll add, Bitcoiners have already done so much, more than they could have. I didn't expect it to go viral. Submitted this in June and forgot about it, and then they've already done so much. They're already putting pressure on Microsoft. But if you could attend the meeting, if you own shares of Microsoft, attend the meeting with your control number. That should be either emailed to you or mailed to you. Vote your shares. You could also go to, we operate something called proxynavigator.com, which is essentially, it'll take you to a site called Iconic, and we can vote your shares for you if you give us the permission to. And so we'll just vote for the Microsoft proposal and all our other proxy recommendations. And I think putting the pressure on Microsoft, and also if you own a BlackRock ETF or a Vanguard ETF or a Fidelity ETF, you're a client. Tell them too, because they're now starting to say, well, we give our clients choice. It's not real choice. None of the choices are to vote for our proposals. So pressure them to let it be known to those asset managers as their clients, we want you to vote for this proposal.
Gotcha. Okay. Hopefully folks will listen and respond, and we can get a better turnout and a better vote record than otherwise. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to walk us through all that and share your experience. Tim, did you have any parting thoughts or anything else you'd like to ask?
I was just going to thank you all for your time. Super appreciate it. Really helpful to understand what's going on here. And if we can go around and everyone can just give, if you have any closing thoughts, and also where people can reach you online.
Nope. Well, to start, we're at freeenterpriseproject.org. Get in touch with us if you have an interest in putting the pressure. If you've got ideas for pressuring, we're happy to work with folks. And otherwise, I think that the one of the keys will be to get the right people into this administration in both political and civil roles. If you're willing to step up and be a competent representative within the swamp rather than what we've got now, this is the time to make your interests and your skills known, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just say thank you for your time. Getting the word out there to shareholders is important. All the listeners, anything that's a grassroots movement can really have a nice effect. So I won't add anything beyond that. And thank you very much.
The only thing I have to say is it seems like you guys have started something that is about to grow, and I don't think there's any putting the genie back in the bottle on this one. I think it's going to be an exciting time. So thank you so much for taking the leap and doing this.
Well, thank you, and thank Ethan for that. That's his baby.
Great. Well, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right.
All right, guys.
Appreciate it.